All right. This is a call to order of the mid-month meeting of the Ducktown Council, April 20th, 2022. And the first order of business is going to be a closed session. At this time, I'd like to ask Attorney Ben Gallup if he would read a motion.
Wait 1 second. Sorry, you're not on.
But I'd probably press something that would break it. I'll try that again. The appropriate motion would be one to go into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3 to consult with an attorney retained by the town in the matter of North Carolina Wildlife Federation v. North Carolina Department et al. v. North Carolina Department of Transportation et al.
I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem if she'll make the official motion.
I'll make the motion as read by our attorney. Thank you.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, all in favor of going into closed session, please say aye. Aye. We're now in closed session. We'll be back out in a few minutes, gang.
Okay, won't take too long.
Take my coffee with me. We are now out of closed session. I'd like to ask Attorney Ben Gell to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Town Council met in closed session and considered the matter of NC Wildlife Federation et al. The North Carolina Department of Transportation et al., and no action was taken.
Thank you. We're now going to go on to item number 1, discussion and consideration of an amicus brief for the Mid-Currituck Bridge. And that we've just had a discussion. I'll entertain a motion to this regard. Could you help us with the motion?
Sure. If you're, I'm assuming you're inclined to join the amicus brief and to
We'll discuss on the motion.
yeah, and to split that. So you'd want to make a motion to join as a party to an amicus brief in the case of North Carolina Wildlife Federation, the North Carolina Department of Transportation et al. Fourth Circuit case number 22-1103, and to join with whatever other parties may join that amicus in a pro rata split of the costs of doing so.
I'll ask the Mayor Pro Tem if she'll make that motion then.
I would like to make that motion that was presented by our attorney.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor?
No, I think it's the right approach.
There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much, Ben. Appreciate
Yes, sir.
it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Town Council. It's good to see you again.
Going to go on to item number 2, discussion consideration of 4th of July parade. Chief Ackerman.
All right, happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm going to go through some brief slides here, kind of pick up where we left off at the retreat in discussion about the 4th of July parade. And at that time, we got some good feedback from council as to some of the things you wanted us to go back and look at. And after that, we've met as a group probably no less than 5 or 6 times. And then Chief Black and I have met weekly since then to go over this and talk through a lot of this. So as you'll remember, we brought forth a number of concerns and challenges that we're dealing with, and we really have narrowed them down to our core challenges that we need to work to overcome. Crowd control certainly being the largest issue for us, and it really is about geography for us. Our parade route, very different than traditional routes, such as what you might see in Nag's Head for the St. Patrick's Day Parade, where they have an isolated road that can be completely blocked off from the main artery. We don't have that luxury here, so we have to work within that U-shaped parade route, which still requires floats to come off of Duck Road onto the route and then back out at the end. The other issue is when the parade's over, it's over, and nearly all of those participants are coming out of there. So we have to deal with a large amount of people crossing Duck Road, and also concerns about the traffic that continues to need to flow there. Our attendance has certainly been increasing over the years, and that goes back to a lot of what we've done. Our own success as a town sometimes presents a large challenge for us, and this is no different. Also, the logistics are required. Our event is small, like most events, but the logistics surrounding it are very large from our perspective. So it's not just simply a 1-hour event. There's quite a bit of time and labor and resources that gets put into that leading up to the parade, months out even, and then even on the front end of the parade and shut down after everybody goes home. Certainly the safety of participants, spectators, and staff are a primary concern for us. A challenge that law enforcement really is seeing, as I reached out to all my counterparts, and all of them denied any resources to me, simply because they all have events the same day. So we're all working, as I said the other day, if we had a May 1st parade, I'd probably be able to call resources from everywhere because they don't have it. This just happens to be a day that's challenging for everyone. Ensuring adequate staffing that evening for fireworks calls also is a big concern. So while we have staffs of 14, we've got to hold back a certain amount of that staff to work that night shift to be out there later in the day or in the evening for fireworks, even though we do work some split shifts to make sure we've got some help. And then this year, especially difficult for me because it looks like the two positions that you gave me, I'm going to lose one, if not both of those officers to approved leave and sickness. So I'm hoping, praying that they're back by the time for this, but that's presenting an additional challenge. And then really, because it falls this year on a Monday, if it was a Tuesday, we'd be able to do a lot of that setup beforehand, but because of the large traffic flow coming in on Sunday, we really can't do much of that work ahead of time. So it really limits us to the day of the parade and having to work on that. So to kind of talk through how we're going to address some of these issues, I believe the number one thing that we can control is the crowd to a point. And the best way to do that is hard pedestrian barricades. They're the bike rack style barricades. So we're not talking about water-filled, massive concrete barricades or anything like that. In the past, we've used topper cones with police line tape run through them. The problem we have is they're not a hard barrier, so folks can come in and out of them. So at the end of the parade especially creates a challenge because it's basically a free-for-all of everybody coming towards the road. So using the pedestrian barricades do a couple of things for us. One, it would provide a clear delineation between the vehicles in the parade and the pedestrians watching the parade. So we'd be able to run those hard barricades directly up Christopher Drive to the crest of the hill, making it very clear there and allowing us to spread out spectators a bit more. Also would allow us to create some funnels, if you will, at the end to get some of those folks that want to leave over to our boardwalk, folks that want to go north and south. We can create routes for those people to go in, and we can also hope to funnel a lot of people that want to cross Duck Road to specific points where we've got crosswalks rather than people just crossing everywhere. Also would be able to use police officers in key locations throughout the parade using a variety of transportation. So by that I mean officers on bicycles, officers on foot, some in cars. I'm going to talk later about a request I've put in through Sheriff Dowdy for 2 motorcycle officers to be able to help us with some of that, the logistics and also the response to anything that we may need to do. Chief Black's working with Dare County Emergency Medical Services to get their Gator, which is a small UTV type thing that's equipped for patient transport and emergency response, allowing them to get, if we had an emergency at a home on the ocean front in the middle of the parade, getting an ambulance in there would be extremely difficult, so the Gator would help to mitigate that. And then also working to have ambulances staged north and south so that if we have a traffic backup, we can get those resources to people who may need them. And then fortunately, fire departments aren't quite as stingy with their resources in the morning as law enforcement might be, so it looks like Chief Black's got at least one fire department committed to assist in working on a second that would be able to provide that north and south coverage so that if we had a traffic standstill, we still could have an adequate response. So if time and resources were limitless in the world that we'd all like to live in, we'd be talking about 4,000 foot of pedestrian barricades, a lot of barricade. But when you really break that down, 4,000 feet of barricade is 500 individual 8-foot wide barricades. Even if we had a dedicated staff of 10, we're looking at 6 hours to put them out, 6 hours to pick them up. Our hope really, because we felt like this would cause or solve the majority of our problem, was to have a company that would come and do the setup for us. Simply cannot find somebody. It's just a matter of where we are and where they are, and it being an extremely busy time of the year. And in their world, they look for projects, large-scale road projects that keep them busy for weeks or months rather than a single day. So unfortunately, those attempts did fail. The thing that I think Chief Black and I really want to point out is that, and especially because we've been here so long, and so somehow I've showed up in every one of these pictures, and that wasn't by design, but for years, we've been able to take on so many extra projects that have saved the town money using our resources, but we've really reached a point based on our visitor population and the other duties we have that we just cannot take on, we cannot service public works and public safety at the same time. Because when I put an officer out, putting out cones, putting in a sign, putting out poles, that's taking that officer out of their primary role, out of that police car, and putting them there. I can sometimes do that with overtime, but when it's a situation where I need multiple officers out there, it's just not feasible to do that, and it's not safe to do that. So it's not that we can't do things, we just have to be selective about what we can and admit or accept what is realistic and what simply isn't. So for us, optimum, having that 500 barricades out there, it's exactly what we'd like to see, but it's logistically impossible. Save for a company that would come out and do it, we just can't do it. So we had to take a second look at it, determine what we could do with the resources we have. And we feel like limiting that down to 1,600 feet, which would be the absolute key areas that we want to cover, brings it down to about 200 of those rented pedestrian barricades. We'd be able to place them in those critical areas and especially focus on that delineation between vehicle and spectator. Just to quickly talk about the rented versus the purchase, while in the long run it's probably cheaper to purchase 200 barricades, we don't have a place to store them. Our environment, those barricades are going to be rusted out and no good in 5 years. So the beauty of renting is the company delivers them to the location, they pick them up and take them away from there. So no storing on our part, no transporting from the fire department to the event site. So I think this is something we can also use at some of the other events we do. But again, renting them makes the most sense. We would look to start the setup right at 6 a.m., which is a bit earlier than we have in the past. And our hope is to be able to get that taken down and the road back open by 1. We feel pretty confident we can do that with a detail of 3 police officers, 3 firefighters, and 2 staff members that would be dedicated solely to that setup. It would sound easy if we could just have 40 people out there and they go down a line and set it up. But the most challenging thing is each one of these barricades has to be transported from the staging area to where it gets set up. And to do that, we would really need to use tractors with forks. So they can only move so many barricades at a time. So that slows that process down a little bit. We would certainly work to try and get those staged as we could and use our resources as efficiently as we could, but it's still a big undertaking. Some of the additional rental resources we've looked at would be the 2 tractors to do that, disseminate those barricades. 2 UTVs, we would use one of those for parade operations. That would put a Christian in one with a police officer and firefighter. They'd kind of be the eyes on the ground at the scene, addressing any issues operationally, and then we'd have a command center that would look at the overall parade operation. And then also it's been effective to use the large solar panel that we've been able, or solar message board rather, that we've been able to rent in the past and put down by Seahawk. That would let us communicate to folks as they were coming in Saturday and Sunday that the parade's both coming up, come watch it, and then also that we would expect a pretty significant traffic delay. So I believe that'll communicate that well. The budget we'd have to look at, it's of course next year, so we'll have to work on this, but renting the pedestrian barricades is just over $3,000, the tractors at $1,400, utility vehicles at $1,000, and then that message board at about $770. And then, of course, delivery fees to get it back and forth from the rental site in Chesapeake. Some of the other operations and logistics pieces we've looked at, using 2 mobile message boards that we're able to get through the Dare County Pedestrian Coalition. They're much smaller, so not as effective roadside, but they'd be very effective to place on Christopher Drive and Scarborough to alert folks that are checking into homes or folks that live there that we're going to be closing down that road at 6 a.m. that morning. It will allow us to safely set up and encourage those folks to stay home for the parade. Getting a drone to do overwatch does a couple things. It allows us to really see the parade from a different perspective than we've ever been able to see it in the past. Drew has asked me a lot of questions, both Chief Black and I, how does this go? How does that go? And our response is, we've never seen the parade from anywhere but the end of Christopher Drive. So both having that from a command standpoint, so there is an incident, we're able to see it, address it, send resources to it, but also as an after action, being able to go back, take a look at things and maybe plan better for the future. Sheriff Dowdy has agreed to give me 2 motorcycle officers dependent on staffing. He's in a terrible staffing situation, which we won't go there with him. I think he says that as a jab, but he will do his best, I'm certain, to give us those resources, but he simply won't know if it's possible until just before the event. We've looked at a re-envisioned unified mobile command post to make sure that we have representatives from fire, police, operations, EMS there on the ground. So if we were to have an incident, the decision makers would be there and able to handle that and have it in a mobile capacity so that we can move to where we're needed. We've already met with Dare County Emergency Management, and we would be putting together, we always use an incident action plan for all of our events, but a more comprehensive plan this year, and also in consultation with them, so that in the event we had an emergency or something, they'd already be well aware of our plan and be able to help us with those resources. And then also, through Dare County Emergency Management, they're able to put us in touch with the National Weather Service. So we'll be assigned an on-demand or a real-time meteorologist that'll follow weather, so we can have some actual hard weather alert planning, so that if lightning is X miles away, we know that that's a cancellation at the last minute, and then we'd have somebody actually providing that information from the NWS rather than us looking at our WeatherBug app to try and do it. One of the things we're just simply going to have to do as we look at our resources, in the past, we've put police cars in the parade. We've put police officers marching with the flags out there. We've put multiple fire apparatus. We simply can't do it. We simply have to focus our resources on the safety of participants and safety of staff. So it's going to mean a limited involvement from us from that side of it. We've got to submit an application for the DOT permit parade, which would be simply for Christopher Drive. And then the last thing, bless you, would be to ensure that we can get recycling and trash completed on Christopher and Scarborough and Ocean Way by 6 a.m. the day of the event. So it's another unfortunate coincidence that that's trash and recycling day, so we've got to get those cans off the parade route, and we can't have the trash truck coming in after we get the barricades set up. So a little bit of a trash challenge, which I think we're used to dealing with lately. Lastly,
say no candy for sure. He didn't have that bullet, but we gave up on the candy a few years ago.
Lastly, this slide kind of represents, it doesn't kind of, it represents the way Chief Black and I think. And we wanted to come back after our discussion last time and really explain that we heard what council said. We're not fear-mongering. We simply live in a world where we look at, in every single thing we do, we look at risk versus reward and risk versus safety. And it is, to us, it's 2022, and we're always, if you will, have a plan to deal with any contingency that comes up. And we know there's no possible way in this world that there can be a response or a contingency to every possible event, but we do our absolute best to address it. So we want council to understand that that's where we're coming from. We have jobs, and that's what we focus on, and safety is just the absolute paramount thing in everything we do, both for the public and both for our staff members. So as we all know, the world has changed a lot in the last 20 years, but even more, we read the intel every day. We read the bulletins that we get from all across the country about the goings on and the motives of people, and that's where some of this comes from. So I don't want to belabor that point, but lastly, we just want to hear if council has any further considerations or discussions or mandates or anything, or questions that we can answer.
Well, I guess my first question is, what are you asking us for?
Well, I don't think,
barricades and everything? I mean, there's no ask, is there?
I don't think there really is. As far as the cost of what we need to do, it's certainly something we've got to look at in terms of the budget that's coming up. That's something we've already begun that discussion with Drew. He certainly offered to cut my salary by that amount, so I thought it was very generous of him. But as far as that, I don't know that there is an ask, just other than council to tell us if you believe this is the correct direction, or this is what you want to see, and this is what you want us to execute.
How about the involvement of Ocean Rescue? I didn't see Ocean Rescue up there. What about their involvement?
In the past, we've utilized Surf Rescue to help with setup. The biggest issue we have is 10 o'clock, they need to be on the beach. And he doesn't have the resources to help us on that end. So we've talked about it. We may be able to get some assistance from him on that the front end, but it's not going to be something we'll have on the back end.
So, Mayor, I think that the biggest ask is when we talked at the retreat about some alternatives to this, so thinking about a reimagined event, mainly to try to get a safer event. And that's so we're still not saying that this event is safe, but we are saying it's safer for the people that are participating, both as spectators and as participants, with the additional equipment than that the chiefs are recommending. So the ask is, do you still want to have a parade? And if you do, we'll figure out the money.
Well, I think when I saw your numbers, and first off, I just want to thank you for the time and effort that you've put into this, because it's clearly something that's been, you're meeting frequently, you're looking at alternatives. So I, commend the staff and you chiefs to look at this, with through the lens of what is needed. I was actually surprised it was as low as it was, but I think that's probably to do with the barriers and what you think we can get and what you absolutely need, signs as well. And it seems to me one of the things two questions I had just based on your presentation, and you mentioned it a little bit, but I'll just say, it seems like we could benefit from more signage, not just on Christopher and on Scarborough, but more, and not just at Seahawk, but at the northern end. So I would be in favor of more signs and more alerts, because there's a lot of transient folks in here, and even, some of the complaints I've heard in the past has been because of employees being late for work. They're not on the clock till they get there, and so these people, it's money out of their pockets, these workers, and you're trying to get to, and you forgot that the parade, and you're the Monday morning anyway, and whatever. It's a hardship for the people that are trying to make a living, and so that is something I think that would help just blanket the information out there with the signs north and south. Maybe even using one of those signs that you're going to do in Christopher, just right at the sites on Duck Road, to say this is where the parade's going to be. You're going to be asked to move in, or however, we can just get people thinking about it the week ahead. The volunteerism that we have in the parade, we've got a lot of it. Certainly that's been helpful when you get into the parade route itself. But what I'm hearing from you is that even if you were to ask for volunteers, you really wouldn't want them to help you set up the barricades?
So, yeah, 2 points, excellent points about the signage. It's not mentioned on here, but we've actually looked at a lot of smaller scale signage that we'd be able to change the way we've done it in the past. But that was our plan, to move those signboards out to Duck Road, within a time frame of the parade. But I think those are great points. As to the volunteer issue, some of the things we talked through just yesterday, we're in a competition for volunteers. A lot of the same volunteers that help the fire department are helping with town events, and Christian and Betsy have a lot of need for volunteers throughout the operation of the parade, and we feel like we'd overtax some of those folks. We certainly ask, but a lot of those folks either aren't capable, aren't willing to do that, or able to do that much, and some of that is pretty heavy lifting. There'd certainly be some concerns from me about injuries or anything like that. So I feel a lot better having staff members handle that portion of it, just for that, working around vehicles and things like that. But you know, we're certainly not opposed to anybody who wants to put on work gloves and come out there and help us with it. But I think the list of jobs is already, we can't fill it with the amount of volunteers we have right now. So that's a challenge beyond just this event, something that I know Betsy and Christian struggle with.
Okay. Those are my two questions that I had on there. Thank you.
Jeff, then we used to get DOT to put that big sign out there for us? That's just something I assumed.
The banner?
No, the sign.
Their rules in the past, or they wouldn't give us something that wasn't DOT sanctioned. So it's certainly an ask, but in the past they've denied our request. That's why we've had to rent that particular sign.
I thought that was a DOT sign.
Yeah, no, that we get that from the rental company in Virginia. And sometimes it's not a denial, it's simply a lack of resources, because there's so many things going on that day. And a lot of the fireworks displays, they've contacted DOT a year ago to be on the list for those supplies. So in the grand scheme of things, that's actually the lowest cost item for us in that. And that's something we generally build into the budget, knowing we're going to use for different events throughout the year. We've used it for Jazz Festival as well in the past.
The other item that you spoke about was the drone. Is our drones for the town capable of doing that for you?
They are, but the people that run our drones, we need them elsewhere. So we're looking at, we'd reached out to a couple of law enforcement agencies that have drones. They denied the request again because it's 4th of July. But we've got 2 other resources there that we're actively working with, and we're pretty confident that one, if not both of those resources are going to be available to help us there. But I'm sure our drone operators would love to do it, but I think Christian has other plans for them.
I appreciate you and the chief's concern over the safety of our visitors.
Does Drew Person have any signs? I know they had a lot during COVID.
He has one. One of them was destroyed, and I think he's waiting on another one. But he's got one. I'm pretty sure that one's committed. I will ask him again, but I'm almost certain Drew told me that was already loaned out. It's just that day's tough. Everyone's fighting for the same few resources that we have.
How many other events are there that morning?
I think we're the only morning event. And what I keep hearing from everybody is, at least the police chiefs have told me, I know I'm going to have my folks out well into the night. And I just feel like they're overtaxed to put them out bring them out in the morning as well. And I feel like I made pretty generous offers to them in terms of return compensation to those agencies for that cost. But it seemed like a burnout was their primary concern.
Could I go back to the barriers for a moment and ask, knowing that you really wanted, however many you wanted, and they were just physically impossible to put all those up, and understanding that you're going to use what you have without seeing a schematic, I get it visually that you're going to, funnel people and make sure along Duck Road makes great sense that they'll only be able to cross at certain crosswalks. And now I'm thinking into the parade route itself, obviously you're going to terminate maybe at the first cul-de-sac in Christopher, and maybe it's the second one in Scarborough, however long, maybe not even in Scarborough, because we don't get that many. Well, historically, it lightens up as you get down there. How are we just considering volunteers for that crowd control, and just, that's what I'm wondering, is how do we keep them back so that they're not like running under, my Mustang tire?
So we saw that is probably our largest challenge. So what we had talked through was basically ending the parade for floats and participants at the first entrance to Scarborough Lane Shops there. And what we'd be able to do is anybody that was walking in the parade, we'd be able to peel them off from there. They'd be able to return back to the staging area to their vehicles. And then also all the floats that may have walkers outside or people riding on it, that would be their indication to go ahead and get back in their vehicles. So when they reach Duck Road, they're ready to pull out. In the past, we've had a lot of problems where they're right there at the end. They've got to stop, get everybody loaded up, and it tends to shut things down. As far as the crowds coming out of there, that's probably the place we will place the largest amount of our resources to deal with those crowds, because if something were to happen, even if it's a medical thing, that's the likely point for that, just because there's so many people, and it presents the largest difficulty. So I know that I would have at least 4 police officers, if not more, stationed there, and they would not leave there. And then Chief Blacks talked about some of her resources. While we've got some great volunteers that can yell with the best of them, some of those folks just, they refuse to comply. So we feel like it's important to have law enforcement with those folks up towards the end of the parade that can kind of be the last line of defense to get people in the vehicle. And we think that'll be a more orderly exit for both pedestrians and the...
And maybe ending it there, or making it really clear that the parade doesn't go all the way to Duck Road.
Well,
Leave the bottleneck right there, and
Yep.
just saying, hey, you're not going to get to see anything unless you get in to...
That's a great point. We've talked about signage hung on those barricades indicating that this is very clear that this is the parade end. So as we direct people and they ask them, one of our big challenges is folks believe that the parade route is on Duck Road. That's just what's in their mind, and no matter how clearly that's communicated, a lot of last-minute folks that end up. So we end up having to direct them up, and that it gives us an opportunity also to make that clear. You need to go up Christopher Drive to see it, but the parade ends at that entrance there. So make sure you're east of that. So I think there's a lot of the little key logistics that we've talked through just at length, and that didn't make it into here, but I can assure you we've really covered a lot of ground, and a lot of ideas have been thrown out. And if we proceed with this, it's certainly going to be a lot more meetings to work out those key points.
They want to leave Jeff up here on the hot seat the whole time alone, as I'm sitting back there. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, we're really just coming, again, the 2022 piece for us, again, it's not the voice of doom scenario, but there's a lot more things we're thinking about as we're looking at lessons learned and things that are happening everywhere, and even doing special event emergency management workshop for 2 days. That was very helpful and validating to us. So that's what we're coming at you with. There is a whole nother plan to some of your questions. We've worked out some of the logistics if this is a go, where we're going to stage people, where to use our volunteer staff that Betsy and Christian have to their best abilities, and make sure there's the authoritative pieces where we need the authoritative pieces, like at the end of Christopher. So that's why we're coming to you. We just want make sure you understand our brains in 2022 with this particular event, and then just get some feedback from you all, as Drew pointed out. So, and thank you, Jeff, for doing the whole presentation.
Any further questions for the chiefs?
I appreciate all the time and effort that went into the understanding and logistics and public safety. That's excellent. I think that the parade is kind of a tradition and a signature event, and so I'm in favor of holding it. And I think with the the planning that went into it, understanding that it's not without difficulty and challenge, should make it for a great event, and I'm in favor of continuing to hold the parade.
Thank you, Tony. Well, thank you very much, chiefs. Appreciate that. Appreciate all you've done. And we look forward to a great parade this year. We know it's going to be an effort, but...
yeah, let's hope for no rain after all this planning.
Yeah, right.
Because there's no rain date, so I don't think.
Or even better, no
Thank you.
hurricane. All right, we're going to go on to item number 3, discussion consideration of planning board appointments. And you've all got the summary page here. We have 2 openings. The terms of James Cofield and Mark Murray have both expired, and they both would like to be reappointed. Jay Bloss has, has his application to be considered again. John Pusciano, the same thing, and he's currently an alternate on the Board of Adjustments. And then James Bartlett, Bob Webb, and Matt Price are all new applicants for the planning board positions. As in the past, the way this works is council will nominate individuals, and if there's 2 openings, everyone gets 2 votes. Robert, can you vote 2 for 1, or do you have to vote individually on 1 vote?
You can, the procedure just simply says each member shall have as many votes as there are positions to be filled. It doesn't say anything more than that.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
But I think traditionally, each member has voted for, if there are 2 appointees or 2 slots, typically they've, had 1 vote for one and 1 vote for another, but the procedure doesn't actually require that.
Drew, do you have any additional comments at all? I think I'll ask you to keep the tabs in.
Right, so yeah, I think the last time we did it, I just kept a tally.
Yep.
Of the ones, so you have to put into nomination the names, and then I'll call for the vote.
And as a reminder on the procedure, it doesn't require a majority. It's just the highest number for each position, each slot.
Right.
Could I ask another question? Was everyone required to fill out a brand-new application, or was it simply resubmitting? Because I thought they were new applications, but then I did see a couple of others.
Yeah, so even the folks that are incumbents were asked to fill out, stating that their interest, and those that have applied in the past, are you still interested? Please apply.
And so the previous applicants also did a new application? Because you're right, we hadn't had,
Right.
okay, so everybody did a new application.
That's correct.
Okay, I thought, and I,
We want to be sure that their interest is current to the vacancies.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'm going to open up the nominations, and I'd like to nominate James Cofield for reappointment to the planning board.
I'd like to nominate Mark Murray to the planning board.
I'd like to nominate Jay Bloss to the planning board.
Nominate James Schofield.
Any other nominations from the council? With that, I'm going to close nominations, and what we'll do is go through the 3 candidates, and everybody cast their votes. First one being James Cofield. I vote aye for James.
Aye.
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 Mark Murray. I vote aye for Mark Murray.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Jay Bloss.
Aye.
Confirm the votes.
Cofield, 4, Murray, 3, Bloss, 1.
So James Cofield and Mark Murray are reappointed to the planning board for 3-year terms. Congratulations, James.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. And thanks to all the
Yes, thanks, everyone.
applicants. I'll just add, if I could, that it's interesting that the 3-year terms, and they're staggered 3-year terms, so that we have them set up, and it's a commitment, and that I greatly appreciate folks making. Interestingly, on our own town council setup, and this is the way we set ourselves up, every 2 years, the entire council can get voted in or voted out. It's just kind of curious. So our planning board actually has a little bit more stability, if you will, or tenure. Thank you for your service.
All right, going item number 4, the highlight of the day, discussion of the full year 2023 budget overview. With that, turn over to our town manager.
Give me a minute. This was done prior to the meeting. Let me just get this back. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So this is your first look and what we're calling a budget conversation, because this is not a budget presentation. By law, the budget has to be balanced. This is not. So this is our discussion with you. It's a little more than a little less gross needs than we did last year. We've already gone through a little bit and taken some expenditures out. But we're going to want your help as we get through the end of this presentation. That was the worksheet I just handed out to you. We want your help to make some additional cuts on the expenditure side. So I'm going to run through revenue. Then we're going to talk about the expenditure side, particularly the personnel, some of the major purchases and projects that are included in this current draft of the fiscal 23 budget. And then we'll just go department by department. I'm going to go fairly quickly in the interest of everybody's time. So throw something at me, put your hand up, whatever, if you need me to stop. And if you have questions or input, we'll do a very quick look at the current 5-year forecast. Of course, that will change as we get this into balance. And then the real meat, what we need from you is just some direction on getting this balance so we can put it all together in the form of a draft ordinance that we can get in the paper to advertise for the public hearing, which will be at your May 4th meeting. So, all that. So we are out of balance of $476,000 and some change. And we'll go into detail on the revenue first. You all received information from me about revenue and expenditures, and you had a lot of stuff to read, and I thank you for your indulgence in reading that. There was a worksheet that looked a lot like the one that's on the screen right now, and it's in that slide. When I say a lot like, there's a number that has changed here. And it has nothing to do with the fiscal 23. It was actually in fiscal 21. Didn't carry the transfer number for whatever reason, so the graph was off, and I didn't catch that actually until Monday at around 4 o'clock, and realized that there was an error, but nothing to do with the current budget. So let's run through revenue. This budget draft, if you will, contemplates no change in the ad valorem tax rate, so 22 cents. Again, that's relying on the input we got from the council during your goal session, which says, let's leave the tax rate alone this year. So we've done that in this draft. You'll see on this graph here, on the far left, so the lower left graph, on the far left, you'll see Duck, and our tax rate of 22 cents is the lowest in Dare County. And you can see our assessed valuation is on the graph and to the upper right, just showing you roughly how our values have changed over the course of the years. Based on the fiscal 22 assessments, 1 cent of their tax rate generates about $184,000. Again, following your input, we will not contemplate any change in the MSD tax rates. These graphs just show how they have been historically, and then also on the upper right, the assessed values in the 2 municipal service districts that have been established. All revenue from the MSDs go directly to fund beach nourishment. So another big revenue source is this is what we call state collected local revenue. So these are revenues that are collected by the state and then shared back out with the individual units of local government. The county gets to determine in North Carolina how they share the sales tax revenue. In our case, Dare County uses the ad valorem method. The other way they could choose to do it is the per capita method. And up until recent legislation, and I think it was just this last year, they used to be able to make a decision in April for the following fiscal year. Now it's required to be lagged a year. I don't see that Dare County will change their way of doing it. I think there would be some a little bit of political upheaval if that were to happen. In the upper right corners of this graph, and Council, you've seen this before, this shows our proportion that we receive of the sales tax. And it's similar, it follows in a similar path with the occupancy tax as well, and the land transfer tax. It's based on our proportion of the total levy, so the amount of taxes that we levy in proportion to the total in the county, including the county's tax. And so we are about 4.1% of the total levy, and that was based on the last year. So we don't have the current yet. That'll be updated in June by the Department of Revenue. So this was based on when we were still at 19.64 cents. We were at 4.17. I don't expect that we're going to move all that much. Our tax rate went up, so our levy went up, and then some other towns also adjusted their tax rates and their levies. So we should be in that same ballpark of that 4 to 4.5% of our proportion. Sales tax revenues. I'm sorry.
The sales tax, so what you've got now in the budget is based upon this formula here? Is there an upward potential or downward potential?
I think that likely it's going to be right, or it's going to probably remain about the same, might shift a little bit.
Shift downward or upward?
Yes.
Got it.
That will be an adjustment.
I don't know which way, and it should not be a significant change based on what we've seen in the past. What you
got in there is a pretty good estimate.
Yeah, I think, so what I've put in the revenue budget is 1.5% increase over fiscal 21 actual. So it's $1.8 million. I think that's pretty conservative. I will tell you, and I'm just going to grab my water. I wrote in the revenue document that you all received, we've had some pretty strong years lately. These past 2 years have been real strong in sales tax and occupancy tax. I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not an economist, but as an amateur economist, I'm looking and seeing signs of recession. And what does it, and then think, what does that do to our sales tax revenue? What does that do to our occupancy tax revenue? I know right now, the summer of 22 is strong. From what I'm hearing, summer 23 is starting out to be pretty strong.
That's
Mayor
true.
Pro Tem is nodding her head, so she has probably the most current information on that. So I think that 1.8 I'm comfortable with. I toyed around with going to like 1.75% increase, and I got to tell you, I'd rather be able to stand up here as we're doing the financial updates, or Jessica's doing the financial updates, and telling you that we're outperforming budget on revenue. So I don't think there's any real need to get all that wild on sales tax.
Going back to the percentage that we have, this 4.17 that we currently have, just to refresh my memory, it's based on the current year tax rate.
Correct.
So we've got all those tax rates from our neighbors, and that's using this data to kind of see where we fall in terms of how much we're collecting based on how much the other towns are collecting.
So we have their tax rates. I don't have their levy, is the thing. So that's what we wait till. So Department of Revenue will do this whole calculation, and we'll put it out, and we'll get that in June.
Oh, kind of late in the game. Okay, so that's the missing piece.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Land transfer tax, again, we've had some pretty spectacular years. I'm anticipating that we should be able to be comfortable at a budget of 500,000. This one I have a little less comfort here than I do the 1.8 on sales tax, only because the interest rate environment is shifting now with mortgage rates increasing. I still think we're okay at 500,000. I don't know if there's any questions, and if you have any questions about any of these taxes and how they're calculated, how they're, and all that, it's explained on the slides, and it's explained in the information that the council received. And once we put a draft budget out to the public, all that information will be in there, so they'll be able to understand where the revenue derives.
So we collected, on the land transfer, we collected 853 and you're projecting 500. Okay, I think that's reasonable based on the fact that the inventory levels are so low and things are slowing down just because it's hard to find anything to buy. Not that there's no demand, but.
Right, so yeah, it was 853 in fiscal 21, and Jessica, do you have year-to-date by any chance? She's looking right now. We're at 6 something. That's fine. 402, yeah, so, and that was through the end of March, so we have one full quarter plus a month, right? So we're going to be in the neighborhood of 650 when we finish this year, we think. So I'm comfortable at 500. We're going to monitor that one pretty carefully.
Yeah, that could be a little bit high, but.
Occupancy tax, again, we've had really strong years. Increasing this one from what we budgeted in fiscal 22, going to 1.85 in this budget. Again, it's based on what we've seen in fiscal 21, which was 2 million. When what we're seeing here in fiscal 22, which should be in that same neighborhood, and then trying to be a little bit conservative, realizing again that we just don't know what the impact of the national and global economy will have on our tourism. Right now, again, summer 22 is really solid, and summer 23 is starting out really solid. So 1.85 probably is a fairly conservative number too.
I'll just add to that it's based on, actual tax value on what you're buying. And if we don't have the volume, I think the price increases alone are going to be, leveling that out. There's a lot of price increases happening in rental rates that would bode well for ongoing strength in the occupancy tax numbers.
So those are the really big revenue sources: ad valorem, occupancy, and sales tax are the three 7-digit numbers that we continue to really look at and rely upon. We do, as council knows, we continue to look for grant revenue wherever we can find it. And we've been very fortunate to get a decent amount of grant revenue. We are budgeting in this draft right now some government access channel grant money that will continue to make a few more improvements in this room, and then also some video content related expenditures. The biggest grant source is the FEMA grant, and this is the brick project. We really believing that this is going to actually happen in fiscal 23. All signs are pointing to it being very positive. I will give council just an update. We did receive another set of questions from FEMA Region 4 today that we'll be asking Chris DeWitt and his team to help us respond to. They believe that we're getting to the end of the questions, and they're very small things, minor questions that they want clarification on. So that's all looking very positive. So along with this, the FEMA grant, the Fish and Wildlife Federation grant also is for the Highway 12 project or the brick project. Visitor Bureau grant, same thing. We budgeted in fiscal '22, and then we're going to budget it in fiscal '23, and we hope that we actually realize the revenue in that year. So that's for the brick project as well. And then also, Joe managed to find an additional $20,000 from Dare County Soil and Water for the brick project. And then also in here is a Governor's Crime Commission block grant that Chief Ackerman has identified and applied for. And that's tied to an expenditure related to a traffic video camera system. So that expenditure will hold pending award. And that's, I'm going to look at the chief now, that's a federal program, it's a federal pass-through, so that'll be in October before we would hear on the award of that grant. And then also we're budgeting for the second tranche of the ARP funding, that's 63,102. There is, when I talked to you in the past about ARP, there was kind of a lot of questions about the restrictions, what we could use it for, what we can't use it for. Well, now you can use it for anything, including supplanting money that you would normally spend on something else. So it's now wide open because we're under $10 million in total award, substantially under $10 million in total award. You know, with about 126,000 is our total award.
So is our initial 63 in the general fund?
Yes. Yeah, and we'll need to clean that up a little bit, and we're going to have to bring some policies to you about how we can spend that money, and there may be some shifting of that and this into a separate project or grant fund that we'll be working with Teresa on to bring to you.
Well, it's nice to know we can spend it.
Yeah, we can actually spend it now. Although, you know, we're gonna want to tie it to something and have the council approve that something, so we can say to the people that you represent, this is what we spend our ARP money on. We're going to be able to, for you all to be able to point to it and not have it be a couple boxes of paper clips or whatever $120,000 buys now.
Plated.
Yeah. So the next one, and again, I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. So beer and wine tax, this shows you how that's calculated. We get $1,700 from it. And that's been a pretty consistent, as you can see, over the years. So we're going ahead and budget $1,700 again this year. Utility franchise tax, I'm not going to read all these bullets. This is a bunch of different sources of money. This is one of those revenues, so it's state collected local revenue that continues to decrease a little bit. Again, it's largely because on the telecommunications piece of it, so telephones. So those of us that don't have landlines in our home aren't paying that tax anymore. So that's not feeding into this. Fortunately, you know, the video programming is still pretty strong and electric is strong. But this revenue source we've seen continue to decline some. So we're tying this $403,000 budget just into the trends that we've seen over the past couple of years with this revenue source. Building inspections and permits, I put that graph in there because there wasn't enough on this page for you to look at. So it's a pretty picture that shows really how busy our inspections department has been. So when you think that lion's share of all these inspections are done by one person, Steve's doing a good job. He's fortunate to have a little help from Kim Pittman now too. We'll talk about that a little bit later as we go on. I will point out that, so we're budgeting $160,000. So we're budgeting that, again, the interest rate environment, the fact that you can't get labor, we're figuring that this might slow down a little bit in terms of total revenue. So really coming just a little bit higher than what we saw in fiscal 20 and calling this $160,000. This revenue is restricted. So according to the state statute, you have to spend the money you collect on building permit fees on building permit work. So the $160,000 has to go to building inspections. Now, we don't pay Steve $160,000, but between Steve's time and then we allocate some of Sandy's, some of Kay's time to building inspections. Some of Joe's time and some of my time are allocated to oversight, plus, capital and that kind of stuff. So we're fine. We do the calculations. Generally, the Home Builders Association and others aren't really looking at, governments like us are looking at where I was before, where it was millions of dollars in permit revenue, and they thought that towns were using this as a cash cow to balance their budget. And obviously, at 160,000 revenue, we're not doing that. ABC revenue has been really strong. So we want people to keep that up. So this is our share of the revenue from the sale of liquor. So we're budgeting a slight increase, 10% over what we budgeted in the current fiscal year. Again, it's been a really strong revenue source for us. Some of the differences you'll see in the revenue budget. So last year we budgeted a good amount of money for the sale of vehicles, so surplus vehicles. We're not going to have any surplus vehicles this year, so that line has gone down. Sponsorship revenue, as it says here, that's for the sponsorship of events. Christian and Betsy work hard to try to get folks to be title sponsors for our events, and that helps offset some of the costs of those. And as we'll talk about when we get on the expenditure side, we're back to pre-COVID levels of events. So we're expecting the revenue to be strong, and obviously our expenditures will go up. Merchandise revenue, this was something, as I mentioned last year when making this presentation, this is one of those changes we made to the chart of accounts, and to really split out what we receive for the sale of Duck branded merchandise. And then there's on the other side, in the expenditure line, there is the purchase of that. So we're trying to be able to show where the money goes to and where the money comes from. Building rental fees, obviously, it's just this room here. Transfers, so this is revenue. So this is transfer from the Beach Nourishment Fund into the general fund so we can write a check. That's all this is. So it's an in and out. And this is primarily, it's the debt service for the Beach Nourishment loans or bonds. So you'll see that in fiscal 22 is 1.4 and some change. Now it's 500,000. So it's gone down significantly. So our debt load and thus our debt service payment has dropped. So then that transfer drops. And that's something it's on both sides of the balance sheet, revenue from transfer and then expenditure out for debt service. Another line that goes down about 680,000 and some change was debt proceeds. So in fiscal 22, we issued debt to purchase the radios and police cars. We don't plan to issue any debt in fiscal 23. Investment earnings, although they're getting better, we're keeping that fairly conservative there. That's just our interest earnings on the money that we have in the capital management trust. So this is just a revenue summary slide, really, and this really show this to show that if you add the 31 and 7 is with 38, so we're about 39, almost 40%. So less than half of our revenue comes from property tax. So you look at local government sales tax being 14% of it, occupancy tax is about 14% of our budgeted revenue, and grants on this particular budget, grants is about 18%. So that's pretty significant. And of course, the biggest piece of that is that 1.6 for brick. Any questions on this side of the budget?
Just to say, well, first of all, I really love the way you lay out every revenue source and the calculations. I really like the format because anybody can pick this up and understand what each particular, how it's all calculated. And so it's a great tool for us, but for the public at large. So thank you for that. If we were moving toward a excuse me, sorry, I got a tickle. If we were in a different year, where you've said here that the ad valorem tax is, you know, in the 31% range, it's slightly skewed because of the grants and the beach nourishment.
Correct.
So that remains for the next 5 years with the MSD income is, I mean, because you don't lump MSD into ad valorem. You got it separated at 7.8, but, and then some of the grant money is going to go toward nourishment too. So it gets a little skewed in terms of what I don't want to say a normal budget, but if we didn't have the heavy financial involvement of the nourishment project, would that carry for the next 5 years as we do this renourishment?
So no, is the short answer. So the nourishment grants are not in here.
Okay.
So that will, as those grants come in, they'll go into that beach nourishment fund.
Okay.
The only grant that shows here is the biggest grant that shows here is that 1.6. So these percentages will shift, yes. So next year, standing up here, that the percentage that ad valorem carries will be higher because we're not going to have $1.6 million in grant revenue that we're budgeting.
Right, it's just the 1 year.
Right.
And interestingly, what you just said, so the MSD tax shows as a revenue, but eventually goes into the special fund with the pool of money from the grants that we get separate. And we keep all that separated in a different tracking mechanism, if you will, as opposed to our normal operation.
Correct. So we receive, and this is important for the public to understand too. So we receive the MSD tax revenue. That shows in this budget as a transfer, as an expenditure side transfer. So we already talked about the revenue, the transfer in from the Beach Nourishment Fund to pay debt service. All the MSD revenue goes into the Beach Nourishment Fund as a transfer. And we'll see that when we get to the transfers piece on the expenditure side. So it's all the MSD tax revenue that we received, plus a proportionate share of the sales tax revenue. It's 19 point something, I've got the number further in the presentation, of the sales tax also goes directly to the Beach Nourishment Fund. What you'll notice is that the transfer out of the general fund is higher than the transfer back in. And you all saw that when we talked about kind of the pro forma of that Beach Nourishment Fund, where it's going to grow. So the revenue is going to exceed expenditure out of Beach Nourishment Fund over the next 5 years, with the idea that we're going to build up a reserve there. So 5 years from now, we don't have to go to the bond market for as much money, if we even need to, depending on how much the project costs at that time.
Thank you.
Clear as mud?
Put the 20% from sales tax into that?
Probably should.
5 years out, would we still have to put 20%?
It'll be whatever the proportion is of our MSD levy to our total levy. So whatever that represents, that's required to put in. I don't believe that the state's going to change that legislation. That's state law.
But on that point, we've always had the philosophy, or the attempt rather, to pay something out of the general fund toward the beach nourishment anyway. Even when we were kickstarting the initial project, we didn't want the MSD to have to, so this is just a kind of a forced way to do that, but we did it anyway, I guess is what I want to say.
Right.
But
It was really more of a correction, I guess.
we weren't doing
Where it
it,
came
we
from.
weren't doing it properly, but we were doing it.
That's right.
And well, now you can tie it mathematically to something, and especially you can tie it mathematically to a law that says, while it's a great idea, you actually don't have a choice.
Right.
You have to make that contribution.
I like the revenue estimates. I think that they're solid. I think they're conservative, which is good. There may be some upside, but I wouldn't want to bet on it. And so I think, the way you've got it stated is good. I think it's a solid revenue statement. The one thing I would raise is when you look at grants are 18.2% of our revenue, which is wonderful. I guess my concern and my question would be, of that 18.2%, how much of the expense that it's covering is discretionary versus recurring? Because if those grants stopped and they were being used to cover ongoing costs, we'd have to find another source for that.
Good, then thank you. Good question. So we don't use, I won't use non-recurring revenue for recurring expenditure. So
Okay.
we don't have, for instance, we currently do not have, like the COPS, there was what's called a COPS grant that you could get. I don't know if that program is still available or not. So
It's open now, but it's highly competitive, and crime statistics drive it.
So what that was it was a 3-year grant, a 3-year declining grant for hiring additional police officers. So we don't have anything like that. So what you'll see next year in fiscal 24, if I can find wood here, knock on wood, that we're actually going to get the brick project done in fiscal 23. So all that grant, or that 1.6 plus the Fish and Wildlife plus all the other stuff that Joe has found, all that revenue will go away, but the expenditure's gone too, because the project's done.
Okay.
Other smaller ones like the crime prevention grant that the chief has identified, tied to a specific expenditure. So
Okay.
if, for whatever reason, if he doesn't get the grant, we don't write a check.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's good for the public to understand that too. We don't get, we're not budgeting grant revenue to keep the lights on or to pay our employees.
Okay, good, cool, that's good.
All right. So that was all the happy stuff. We're still 476,000 out because we haven't talked about the other side yet. So on the other side, the expenditure side, 15 functional departments plus 2 other categories that we show you, which are transfers and contingency. You have this summary, council, and this is a little small to read. Hey, Jessica, could you give Mr. Cofield a copy of the slide deck so he doesn't have to strain his eyes to see? Throw something at me, would you? That's kind of small to read. The way it's the current draft, we're at 4.3% reduction in budget over fiscal 22. The biggest chunks of that being in capital and in debt service. So debt service is the big one. That beach nourishment debt service has dropped, so that's where you're going to see most of your reduction. We show this to let you see kind of how the money gets spent by type. So we type things. We have personnel, operating, capital, and then debt service and transfers and contingency. Pretty even split. Again, the capital piece will shed down a little bit once we get that brick project done. So next year, we may not be as capital heavy as we are this year. We'll talk about personnel. So again, one of our larger expenditures is for personnel, 40 full-time employees for the town in fiscal 22 and recommending 40 in fiscal 23. So we're not recommending any additional personnel fiscal 23, nor are we recommending any change in allocation of personnel expenditures among the departments. So everything stays the same from what you budgeted in fiscal 22. The one change that I've noted there in public safety, they have a split employee. We're changing the title of that from administrative assistant to public safety office administrator, really to acknowledge that her role is more than the traditional administrative assistant. She's actually doing more program support work, doing a lot of very detailed and technical work for both of the chiefs. So we're recommending that we changed the title, and that will come with a change in pay grade, 1 grade. Bring them more in line, get a little more internal equity as well with other employees. Then just this next slide just shows you the breakdown of how the personnel expenditures lay out. As you would expect, the majority of it's going to be in salary and wages, and then you can see how the benefits are spread there as well. This graph just shows the total number of personnel. Again, we're not recommending any change in fiscal 23. Then the black line shows total personnel expenditures over the years, and that's since fiscal 16 all the way to the proposed fiscal 23.
I have a question on workman's comp.
Yes, sir.
Is that workman's comp is everybody? The number you have there?
Yes. Yep.
I really like the
We're
breakdown.
insured through the League of Municipalities as our workers' comp insurer.
Thanks for the breakdown, both on that slide and on the previous, showing kind of the growth in between departments and such. I think it's really helpful. You know, kind of really shows on that other slide that the main change has been in our police and fire personnel in the last 4 years, or, you know, last 3. Most of it.
Yep. All right. So a few changes in personnel that we're recommending that are actually included in this budget. So one of the things, we have an adopted pay plan, and that pay plan comes with the salary table. And what needs to happen every year is the salary table needs to be adjusted by the rate of inflation. And so you do that because if you want to hire somebody in, we want to be competitive with the other municipalities on the beach, and or actually anywhere. So that's the way that pay plan is designed when MAPS did it for us. So that's one of the things we do every year is you adjust that table, and it's a fairly simple adjustment. You just, if you look in an Excel table and the cell in the upper left corner, you adjust that by the rate of inflation, and that automatically calculates everything out because it's 5% as you move across and 5% down between grades. So what this means is, however, is that when we adjust that, 9 of our employees will fall below the minimum for their grades. So according to our personnel policies, if someone falls below the minimum when the pay plan is adjusted, you need to bring those people up to the minimum of that pay grade. So when I say pay plan adjustments, that's $18,000. That's to bring those 9 employees up to the minimum of their pay grade. Does include police career development. We began that this past year, and this will promote some additional folks as they continue to have tenure with the town and continue to get advanced levels of training. It also gives sergeants a little bit of room to move, again, based on tenure and training. Then fire, we're starting a career development program there, trying to give some room for firefighters to, again, through tenure and training experience, and ultimately additional responsibility, to be able to have them progress in their careers here as well. So all that, you can see those numbers shown there. The big one, and I know I wanted to talk to you all about this one, is COLA. I've been at this for 21 years. This is probably the second time I've talked to a council about COLA. I'm not a fan. I'll come right out and tell you that I'm not a fan of COLA. I believe that we need to have most of our increases built into merit. The reason I'm here standing and telling you that I'm recommending a 1.5% COLA adjustment is the rate of inflation is outpacing our current merit pool. So right now, our employees can get a maximum of a 1.5% salary increase and a 3% merit bonus. Inflation for the second half, the second full half of the year in calendar 21 was roughly 6%. So we're falling behind. We can show that here. You can see the rate of inflation. What I'm recommending is 1.5% merit increase, 3% merit bonus, and then a 1.5% COLA adjustment one time. So one time, assuming that the rate of inflation gets back under control and you need to change my battery, don't you? Under 4.5%. I'm starting to break out a little bit. I use the microphone too much.
Word out.
It's almost like a NASCAR pit stop. Thank you, Christian. That was awesome.
Yeah, really. New tires.
All right, Mayor, I'm good for another 3 or 4 hours now. How y'all doing? So I say one time, we'll just continue to watch the inflation rate. My concern is with 1.5 and 3, it's 4.5%. Inflation's at 6. Basically, you're absent an additional adjustment, people get an effective decrease in their pay by 1.5%. Not an actual decrease, but a buying power decrease because of inflation is outpacing the increase they've gotten.
Could I ask a quick question? Back to the pay plan adjustment, what was the rate you used there? I think I missed it.
6%.
So you adjusted, the pay plan adjustment was a 6% across the board to the pay plan itself.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean anyone's, except for the 9 that met the minimum, are the ones that fell below, and therefore, okay. So that was a 6% one-time adjustment based on last year's inflationary rate.
Correct. So every year we adjust that by inflation. So if inflation goes negative, you adjust it to the negative. And the only ones that are affected are ones that fall off, or the people, and we don't have any, that have topped out. So if they've topped out and you move the pay out 6%, they can move up
To a next level.
Well, they would just move out a little bit, so their salary would probably increase by that. But we don't, again.
Right, we don't have that, but they would be the
no one's
outlier.
close.
Okay,
No one's
they
even
wouldn't
close.
they wouldn't not get it, they would just be
Correct.
outside the realm.
Right.
Thank you for explaining that.
Drew, is the, that 119, 429 total there on personnel? 119,000, right?
Correct. That's for the pay plan adjustment, the career development, and COLA.
Right, and that would be included in the 174,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then looking at, to that page, the 3,798,000 is the budget request. And the estimate for this year is 3,571,000.
Because it includes workers'
Figure out,
comp.
Yeah?
where are you?
I'm on page 11. I'm looking at the gross needs budget summary expenditures. You're requesting 3,700,000, the one with the pie chart.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we're requesting 3,798,742.
Correct.
Which is 174,000 more than the current year's budget,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
So I guess what I'm saying is if we're going to end out at 3,571,000 estimate, is the increase besides the 119, is that due to less than a full year of people being staffed, or?
So the rest of it would be,
Workers' comp and all the fringe
yeah,
benefits?
so it would be some of the insurance. I'm trying to think if I understand the question. Yeah, so it is. So that's the delta. So it would be, there's not a whole lot of change in workers' comp, but so everybody, we build in that people will, we budget that people are going to get their merit increases. So that's built into that as well. But we don't, yeah, we're not running anybody half year or anything this year.
But that, yeah, so, well, the 119 includes the merit, full merit. But the difference that he's talking about is probably just the fringe benefits and the extraneous charges that go along with an employee as opposed to just salary.
Right, so and it's a little bit, so that 119, it's going to be fuzzy math. That 119 is loaded.
Yeah.
So that includes all of the compensation-related benefits. So that is
Yeah.
retirement, 401k, FICA on the COLA.
Yeah.
On the
So
other side.
I mean, it's really only like $55,000, but I mean, that's 10% of what we're looking for. Why wouldn't we just add 119 on top of 3,571,000 versus 119 on top of 3624? You see what I'm saying?
Actual versus
You don't understand what I'm saying? We're saying that, you're saying that personnel line is going to go up $174,000
Correct.
based on your budget from last year.
Correct.
But I'm saying, you're telling me you're only going to spend $3,571,000, which is less than your budget of last year.
Like 20.
Oh, yeah, yes.
So why don't you just add the 119 on top of 3,571,000 instead of adding 174? If you know all of your costs are going to go up 119,000 and you're only going to spend 3,571,000,
Not all of our costs. So that does not include the changes in retirement rate. So that 119 does not, all that 119
okay,
is.
all right, I understand.
Yeah, so it's
Got
not the
it.
yeah, so it's, and the 174 is compared to the budget, not the estimate.
Yeah, but you're only spending the actual, you're not
Right.
spending the budget.
Correct.
So I mean, if there's more expenses for retirement, then I understand that.
Yeah, that's an increase, yeah.
You also during the year have a change of personnel too, up and down.
Well, I'm thinking that's what it is too, yeah.
I got a couple questions. Pay plan adjustment. Historically, we don't have any track because we just started this process a year ago.
Correct.
I mean, we never basically changed the pay plan for years, correct? So, and the 6% came from the inflation rate where?
So that is the CPI, and that is it is the all-consumer, not seasonally adjusted second half average.
And my second question is going to be on the COLA. I'm not a fan of COLA because I came from the business world. We never did COLA. We did merit and bonus. Is there any reason why we wouldn't take that COLA and put it into the merit increase and merit bonus? Move that 1.5%? I mean, we're not going to, I mean, basically, it's going to be earned rather than just automatic. I mean, I really like merit and bonus, and you can still get to the 6% the same way, but we also don't actually increase a lot of our liability over future years. Just throw that out as a question.
Well, didn't you just say you only wanted to use the COLA this one year? You weren't normally a fan of it? I mean, we have, historically, we've used it, but we've done 1.5 COLA and we've done 1.5 merit. We didn't do the 3% bonus before.
I think we changed back 2009, 2010 to the merit and bonus. We haven't done COLA in probably 10 or 12 years.
Oh, I'm mistaken.
Is the bonus a lump sum? It's a one-time lump sum of 3%? Yeah.
We want to give the employees the dollars for sure. We also want to look at the future, the growth. And you could actually adjust that bonus every year for COLA if you wanted to.
I thinking we were doing, I thought it was 1.5 and 1.5.
Yeah, but we never did COLA. It was always.
1.5 was merit and 1.5 was,
But I think we made that change about 10 or 12 years ago to be a bonus versus anything else. In other words, the 1.5 wasn't enough, so we're going to give the employees an opportunity to gain a bonus for better performance.
I thought we always built in like a flat 1.5% increase in the budgets. I'll have to look back.
Probably not in the last 10, 12 years.
And then we did 1.5 for merit, but I'm going to look back, but.
So, and the only downside to, let's say you want to do 4.5 on the bonus is that, and I've done the math, and you can see the growth if you build everything into salary rather than into bonus. The issue then becomes is if we hire, let's say we've got a patrol officer that's been working a couple years, they're getting their bonus, their salary's not moving. The pay plan moves, and they'll move to be sure that they get the minimum as we adjust the pay plan. You bring somebody brand new in, basically at the same rate as a 2 or 3 year employee. It causes compression when you're not moving your current employees further out in their pay range. So that was part of the, I think that was part of the problem you all solved with having Becky come in and do the pay study and all that kind of stuff and get everything laid out, was there, you were starting to see that compression. Now,
Put it in the merit increase then. Rather than putting in a bonus, put the 1.5 in the merit increase. And, you know, if you get good employees with great performance, they're going to get it.
I mean, so a 3% a discretionary 3% on the merit as opposed to?
Yeah, take the 6%, reallocate it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if you look at the merit increase, we're saying that, you know, I think we're saying it's a 1.5% merit increase and a 3% bonus. So when you think about the merit increase, I mean, you're picking that 1.5 based on the way you've seen inflation and everything trending, and that's why you're saying it's 1.5. Based on the information now, you could make an argument and say, well, that should be 3% this year. Next year, it may need to be 3% again, or the following year, it may be back down, and it could be 1.5% again. So I think if you do it that way, it's different than you know, saying automatically we're going to do a COLA. COLAs have a way of never going away.
They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you still want to be fair to the associates, so you just look at the merit increase in you know, the context of what's going on in the economy and the world, and you say, you know what, a 1.5% merit doesn't cut it these days. It's got to be a 3% merit. That would be my input on that.
See what we've done before. 'Cause I'm confused. I thought we always did a flat increase.
Yeah.
And then we had a discretionary bonus. So I've got to just clear my head of that misconception if that's the case.
okay, so
I agree with what you're saying, but I think
we're good with the number, it's just what we call it, right? So you want,
We just want to call it different things.
Yeah.
We're saying that someone can be eligible for a 3% merit increase and a 3% bonus,
Yeah.
okay,
right?
Yeah. And look at that merit increase every year based upon.
And then every year you look at the merit increase. Should it be 3? Should it be 2? Should it be 4.5? You know, hopefully it's not 4.5, or we'll really be in trouble, right? I mean, the world.
okay. So we'll rephrase that and we'll take the COLA acronym out of there and put 3% as the max available merit increase and 3% max bonus based on performance. Is that what I'm hearing from council?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if everybody agrees.
Yeah, because, I mean, theoretically, you know, a COLA, you get it whether you're performing or not. You know, as opposed to the 3%, you can say, you know what? Or the manager can say, you know what, Joe, you're just doing okay. I can't give you the full 3% here based on your performance. I can look at you later, but right now, or whatever. But with the COLA, boom, you're locked in.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Boy, there's no way you can read that. This is just a breakdown of the capital projects that are included in the budget. You have it in front of you. It'd be easier to read. Lieutenant, if you wanted a copy of that? You can see it just fine. Yeah, you got better eyes than I do. And then operations, and we'll get into more of these as we go through department by department. Council, you all received the debt service section and the debt obligation section of the budget document, so you understand what your debt obligations are. They are what they are. You don't have any discretion. You have to pay your bills. So we're just putting that there so you all understand where we are, what our interest rates are, and the amount of debt that was issued, and then the next table there, when it shows up in yellow, just breaks down the different debt issues and shows you how much more time you have on each one of those issues. So that the town hall is in the upper left corner here, so that will retire in fiscal 26. That debt service payment dropped because we were able to ask for and receive a lower interest rate. Unless you have questions about debt service, I mean, we're going to pay your bills. Otherwise, the LGC comes knocking on the door.
And just so on the total column over here, you just took all of them and just added them all up here?
Correct.
That's kind of what it's all about, yeah. I really like this chart too. This is kind of fun. Love that we're almost done paying for the town hall.
That's amazing.
I know, it's great. First the park and then the town hall.
So with your indulgence, we'll just start running through by, kind of running through this by department. This is just a summary slide. Again, 15 functional departments plus transfer and contingency. Just shows you the breakdown, the pie chart. Shows you, and as you would expect, police and fire are always going to be some of the larger pieces of the pie because they're the most personnel intensive. Streets and highways is big because of the Highway 12 project. So once brick falls off, that will that piece of the pie will shrink considerably. So we're just going to run through this very quickly. You've all have had this, so stop me if we get to something that you want to talk a little more about. So governing body, these are expenditures related to the governing body. So it's the salaries for mayor and council. This year, as it shows here in the notes, so the contracted services line drops because this department also pays for the election of town council. There's no election this year, so that does drop. This is where we pay for the property and liability insurance. So just for lack of a better place to put it, we haven't really gone through and divided up and allocated the cost of insurance. So we just kept it lumped here for trending purposes. We used to carry workers' compensation insurance here, but last year we began to put that wearable into different departments where the personnel actually are and show that as a personnel cost. Administration it's the manager, clerks, portion of K, and it also has Jessica, Christian, Betsy. So the administration department. So it includes training for those folks. A lot of expenditures related to our communications are contained in administration. So the expense for website and those type of subscriptions and licensing and that we need to do for our events. The only kind of unusual thing here that we show this capital item is, and I just realized, Mr. Ciano, you still haven't been upstairs in Town Hall. We need to get you over here.
What's that?
Have you been upstairs yet in Town Hall? Yeah.
Well, not since I've been elected, but yeah, I've been upstairs.
So when we hired a community planner, we put him in a partition right outside of Sandy Cross's office. The idea is we want to have another one of those kind of office cubicles on the other side, being the wall common with Lori's office, and that's where Kay will be. Because we're not open to the general flow of public, we really don't need a receptionist there. And Kay is kind of caught in the middle as far as the people coming and going. And there's a lot of noise associated with that. So be able to give her a place where she can work in a little more concentrated setting. And then all of the office equipment will go into the little nook where Kay is now. So both copiers and the postage meter, well, actually 3 copiers, will all be in that area. So a little work area that's not really tied to anyone's workstation.
Could I just ask, are you expecting never to open again to the public?
Unless council takes a vote saying we're going to, that's our plan.
And that's just for safety reasons?
Yes. Safety and workflow. We got 3 people working in really short cubicles in the middle of that space. We have not heard any service-related issues. When someone comes for a meeting, we'll either tell them, come on up the elevator, or we meet them in the first floor conference room.
Okay, good to know. I wasn't aware of that, but great.
So the finance department is so professional services related to our audit preparation and then preparation of our financial statements. 2 different people do that. So Lisa's firm does the audit, and then Teresa prepares the financial statements. And we also will continue to use Teresa pretty much monthly to review our books. She's not auditing or anything like that, but just another set of eyes. And that just makes it a lot easier on her, actually, when she prepares the financial statements at the end of the year. She can work with Jessica. And we also, it's great to be able to, for Jessica to be able to pick up the phone and call Teresa and say, I'm running into this odd thing, how do I handle it? And Teresa's been a great resource for us. So we'll plan to use her, obviously not as much on the day-to-day stuff as that she used to have to do now that we have Jessica here, but let's continue to use her a little bit. And then we also, in this department, the contracted services is with Dare County, 1.5% to collect our taxes for us. Legal department, so we contract with Robert and his team to provide legal services. There'll be no change in the monthly retainer rate and no change in the hourly rates for fiscal 23. And we don't anticipate the level of legal expenditures that we've had over the past couple of years. So we reduced that budget a little bit. Sorry, Robert. Public facilities, so this is the department that covers the maintenance of all of our facilities, we include the boardwalk in this as well. It does pay for 1 full-time employee, contracts for the maintenance of our grounds here. mowing and the flower bed work on the duck trail are paid in streets, so that's not paid in public facilities. Also includes the irrigation maintenance, septic maintenance. Let's see what's unusual here. So we're going to put signboard outside of Town Hall. This is, Christian actually had this idea, and it's a great one to get all the stuff that's taped up to the door off the door in one place for people to be able to go and read. Think about the old town crier bulletin boards that you may have seen in the past, something like that outside where it can be kept somewhat secure and allow us to put the public notices and advertisements on there. This does include $85,000 for public safety building repairs. We'll talk about that as we get into the worksheet work. That's a new roof and some siding and paint. We'll talk to you about that again. Town Hall emergency stairs, we talked to you about this in the CIP. It's about $8,500, and that's to put a set of stairs out of the second floor conference room to provide a second means of egress for the folks that are working on that second floor. Includes $25,000 for maintenance shop improvements. This was a CIP item that you'll recall was $120,000, and you'll recall me being dumbfounded and shocked because I missed something. Hard to believe I missed something. Where they actually were going to add another building and not change the ones we had. So, or not replace the ones we have. This $25,000 will actually carry us for several years by making some decent improvements that increase storage space and functioning utility of those spaces. And then includes some HVAC improvements, and those are for this building and Town Hall, and it's installing ionizers, which are a way to purify or clean air. Just a good idea to have even after, we're still fighting COVID, but even just cold and flu and that kind of stuff, the ionizers will remove a lot of that from the air. Information technologies, this is contracted service. Shoshin is our vendor. This also includes the licenses for our Microsoft products and other software similar to that. It does include the expenses related to our internet connections, so our internet service providers are included in here, and our telephone system, so the VoIP phone system that we have is included here. That vendor is VC3. Then we have a project here. It's a new project. It was $35,000 for records digitization. I knew I was going to stumble on that word. Records digitization. To begin to set up ways to efficiently store digital records so we can begin to dispose of some of the paper records that we have that we really don't need to keep. And we'll be coming back and talking to council about records retention and disposal. The issue that we're facing as council, probably some of you may know, is the file room is full. So we need to work on getting some of the stuff transferred to digital. Police. Wow, that's really small. Sorry about that. You have this in front of you, and obviously council has had this information. So have these worksheets. No new personnel. This does include an initiative for police officer mental health that you've heard the chief speak about. The RMS, records management system replacement, was a CIP item, as was the radar speed sign program. The traffic video camera network, that you recall we talked about the crime commission grant. So this is the expenditure to go with that potential grant. And then also MDT replacement, so replacing mobile data terminals, which are the computers that the officers have in their cars. And then also includes some partitioning for the sergeant's office, some office partition, and then also this has 50% of the expenditure for an office cubicle set up for the Public Safety Office Administrator. So the other 50% of that will be paid for in the fire department's budget. Again, that's just to give that employee, Ms. Martin, a place where she can do concentrated work in an area that has a lot of stand around and through traffic with personnel. Fire, so we're replacing some turnout gear, and this was included in the CIP. SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, so the air pack replacement. Hose and appliance replacement, this is something that we're doing as part of the CIP. We're programming this so we can continue to keep things like that current. And by appliance, I'm not talking about washers and dryers. These are the connections and the fittings and such that and nozzles and that kind of thing that the fire department uses. The largest expenditure, aside from personnel here, is the direct subsidy to, or direct allocation, to the fire department. And that's broken down on the next slide to show where where the fire department, how they budget, and then the chief then has to manage her budget. And that's been a little bit of a challenge in the current fiscal year with vehicle-related expenditures. So there is an increase in the request here of just a little over 20,000.
So we keep those two things separate, the allocation and the departmental expenditures always stay separate.
Correct. Inspections, so this is one full-time employee, and then we allocate some of the cost of Kay and Sandy here. This pays for the permitting software that team uses, and then the travel and training for primarily the building inspector, and then also for our maintenance technician, Kim Pittman. We are having Kim, very fortunate to have Kim, start taking his training, working towards licensure as a building inspector, so in all trades, so he can be Steve's backup. Ocean Rescue is, the increase here is directly tied to the contract. The only, according to the contract, and Merrick is already making accommodations for this, the contract says he's supposed to increase by 1 stand this year. It is actually increasing by 2. The second one is actually a split of a current 2 stand. So there'll be 2 more stands out on the beach. The one thing that we hadn't allocated here before, and we are now, is the town provides a phone and iPad for the Ocean Rescue, and that's been absorbed, I think, might have even been in the police department or fire department, but it belongs in Ocean Rescue, so we're going to continue. We're just going to start to track that here. Streets and highways, this is a pretty large budget, and it's almost entirely driven by the brick project. You'll see there, the capital outlay line is requested at $2.7 million. So that is the brick project. This department also does the maintenance of the plantings and such along Duck Trail and other maintenance there. It does the annual repaving work, Duck Trail, some stormwater management is included in here. And this follows your capital improvement plan, as does the retaining wall replacement. The other additional item here that we heard about from Mr. Gould was to add some additional bike and pedestrian counters. So that's included in this budget. Sanitation is just direct increases related to increasing contract costs, so those escalate part of the way through the year. This budget contemplates the maximum increase, which is 2.5% on one and 3% on the other, I think it was. But both are tied to, so it's max tied to CPI. So we're ahead this year. Those contracts are both up in '23, so we're going to have to go back out and get new bids. So we can expect that when we budget in fiscal '24, we're probably going to see a much greater increase than this. So environmental protection, again, formerly called beach protection. This is the professional services related to our beach nourishment and our beach management. Also includes professional service for engineering related to the town park living shoreline project that we're beginning to work on. Includes a stormwater management plan and some the normal beach planning and beach monitoring that we do each year. One of the largest expenses here, obviously, is debt service, and that's for the beach nourishment project.
And that's just a pause we see this year in the debt service.
No, so that 500,000, that's going to be your debt service for the next 5 years.
Okay, so the differential, okay, I'm sorry, I see that,
Yeah.
okay. Differential, we're just, okay.
Yeah, the negative 869 delta will go away, and it'll be much smaller delta. Yeah. Community development is this. This is Joe, Jim, and half of Sandy are in community development. It pays for their travel and training, and then other just shared expenditures. No major capital projects contemplated in this department in the coming year. Recreation special events. I won't read this to you, so it's just some signage, and there's our events. We're back into the pre-pandemic number of events, so you'll start to see those costs get back to where they were prior to 2020. And then this is where I mentioned earlier the revenue line for the sale of duck merchandise. This is where the expenditure happens for that, and it's a separate line in this budget. Wow, you did it. So that's the expenditure side. Yes, ma'am.
This would be where we would put those barriers? Would that be in this group, or would it be in the police?
That was Chief Ackerman's salary.
That's right.
Yeah.
He doesn't miss a trick.
Yeah, we would put that into event expenditure. It's not in here right now.
That's where we would stick it if we needed to.
And
okay, thank you.
And we'd have to look at it and see if, we'll need to add a little bit. Need to add a little bit to that. All right. So this is just it's expenditure by type, and it shows you back into fiscal 17, shows you what the trending is. The gold dashed line is the total expenditure. The red dashed line correlates to the axis that's on the right of this graph, and that's the total number of employees. It's just give you an idea of the number of employees over years overlaid with total expenditures, again by type. The big gold bars in the current fiscal year, so fiscal 22 and then fiscal 23, are largely driven by that brick project. And I just threw the revenue graph in there for you as well, so you can see the trending there and see where those differences are. Again, the big orange bars are for the brick project. It's grants revenue. So we're still out of balance. Probably going to be a little more out of balance. I don't know how, I'll have to get the total from the chief and what that's going to cost us. I know he's got that number.
And again, the transfers is where we would see the money going out from the MSDs on the expenditure side.
Correct.
And on the income, revenue rather, we wouldn't see the MSDs at all.
Right, so the transfer out of the MSD tax and the proportion of sales tax goes into the beach fund. And then on the revenue side, there is transfer, and that is that in the gray bar. And you can see the gray bar in fiscal 23 shrinks. That's because that's the money we're bringing in to pay for debt service. So that's transfer into the general fund for debt service from the basically from the beach fund, which is clear as mud.
No, it's good.
Okay.
And yeah, get even more granular at some point. I'd love to get a projection out of those MSDs and inflows and outflows and look at that over the next, but we'll do that another time.
Sure, and I can send that to you again, because you all, I mean, when we talked about we did the pro forma of the beach nourishment fund, actually, to show what that growth would be. So revenue from MSD taxes, revenue from sales tax as the in, and then the expenses going out and what the balance is. And that's the one that showed that we should have 4-ish, 4.5 by the time we get into the next beach nourishment cycle. So we should be hopefully not needing to issue a whole lot of debt. Again, that'll depend on how the beach performs in the next 5 years and how much sand we need to put back on it. All right, so we're still out of balance. We'll get to work on that in just a minute. So fund balance, I just wanted to show you this. Red line, so fund balance is your unassigned fund balance divided by total expenditures less the beach nourishment debt service. You have a minimum of 50% according to your financial policies and a target of 75. So the target is a little looser than the minimum. If we fall below that 50%, according to your policies, you need to take action to correct that. And what that action typically would be a direct allocation to fund balance in order to replenish that. And you can do that according to your policies over a number of years, but that's something that we obviously will keep a real close eye on with you. Real strong fiscal 21. The fiscal 22 projection, 72.5%, is just based on our estimates currently of revenue and expenditures. It does include the $250,000 that we just spent, or $750,000 that we just spent on the fire truck. So that's already removed from this or calculated in this. And we're still looking at about 72.5% fund balance at the end of the fiscal year with a growth of about 766,000.
If we bring the budget, obviously, into balance for the coming year, do we go above 75? Your guess is really, because we'd be making a fund balance.
I don't know if do we budget a fund balance contribution?
No, so we're not budgeting any allocation to fund balance, and we're not budgeting any appropriation from fund balance. So it's just whatever is inelegant left over at the end of the year. So revenue in excess of expenditures at the end of the fiscal year goes into fund balance. Right now, even after the purchase of the fire engine, we're looking at about just a little north of 750,000 to go into fund balance at the end of fiscal 22.
But because our budget has increased, that's why our fund balance percentage is dipping.
Right.
In addition to some other factors.
Right, so even, and I know the mayor and I have talked about this too, there's a numerator and a denominator to that percentage. And, while the numerator is growing because we're adding dollars into the fund balance itself, when we're spending more money, the denominator grows, so the percentage changes. So you have, yeah. And well, actually, when we get into the worksheet piece, you can mess around with a little bit on the fund balance, and you can see what the effect is on some different expenditures. So anyway, the good news is right now we're looking at adding more into fund balance, assuming that this last quarter of the fiscal year performs as we're estimating. We'll add more in, again, even after the purchase of the fire truck. Fire engine, I'm sorry, it's not a truck, it's an engine. The 5-year forecast, I'm not going to read to you all the assumptions that go in with this. There's a lot of calculations and formulas built into this Excel spreadsheet. I'm not going to read them all to you. Try to be pretty conservative on estimating revenue increase and base expenditure increases on what's in the CIP as best we can. So that's as you're looking out in that 5 years. To continue, we're not looking to add, more personnel or anything, but personnel costs will continue to increase. Operating costs will continue to increase with inflation and so on. And then, the transfers is all based on what we believe to be actual. So revenue expenditures, and this needs to be fine-tuned, and we're going to have to fine-tune this after we get this budget balanced. So obviously in fiscal 22, the lines touch because you're required to have a balanced budget. And then the lines are going to stay touched in fiscal 23 because we're going to have a balanced budget when we're done here. But then as we look out, especially, and again, it's because of the stuff in the CIP, and those get to be some decision points that the council will have to make as we continue to budget in future years. So you'll see that you're just going to need to figure out where how and when we do those different projects.
Drew, does the 5-year plan include the drop-off of this and then the addition of the public safety building?
It includes the drop-off of this. It does not include the public safety building debt service.
Okay.
Yeah, so it includes current debt service. It includes future debt service for vehicle replacement, which are some of the easier to know.
Right.
And it also includes some future debt service for beach nourishment based on the pro forma that we did. Again, that gets to be somewhat easier to know. Still a lot of unknowns about the public safety building.
Okay.
So that's a good question. That will change that, obviously. It'll increase that spread by the amount of debt service. So we'll have to debt finance that. More squiggly lines, and basically show you this just to show you kind of the variability of what capital does over the years. And personnel and operating tend to be a little more linear as you're going out. Increasing, obviously, because we're just anticipating that costs will continue to increase as inflation does its thing. All right. So the second question is really easy. Additional revenue, none. So the question being, and I gave you all a worksheet, and I welcome your thoughts on what we can do. I have some, but it's not my budget. I'd be happy to talk those through with you.
The goal here today is to determine what to cut so that on May 4th, we can present a balanced budget for the public hearing.
I'm not seeing
There's
what's-
also opportunity on here to move into this year.
Yes, so what you have, I don't know why okay, Kristen's getting it. So, yeah, the worksheet that you have has, and these are just some of the one-offs. So it shows the item, it shows the department, it shows the cost. And then also there's the next column says cut in gross needs budget. That's stuff that we've already eliminated. So we've already eliminated 156,000. So we've already closed the delta that was then in excess of 500,000 before we made these cuts. The next column, that if you want to restore something that's been cut, obviously that makes the delta bigger. We can move things to a subsequent year. So basically say, we're not going to do it in fiscal 23. Drew, figure out how you're going to handle that in fiscal 24 or 25 or what have you. We also have a column there that we can move some projects into the current fiscal year. So remember, we're planning to add about $700,000 into fund balance. If we want to add less and do some of the projects that are currently in the fiscal 23 budget, do them now. It gets them done. It just reduce the amount of cash you put into fund balance, and it increases the denominator also. So it makes that percentage shrink a little bit.
So do you have recommendations of what we could move into this year, such as the stairs?
Yes.
You do have that?
I'm going to have to. Sure.
Just happen to have it printed out for us.
What's that?
Just happen to have it printed out for us.
I'm not sure. So we don't have to go through these one at a time. Let me.
What's that?
Oh wow.
Yep.
Our target's about 300K, right?
Oh no. Our what?
Our target on reductions is about 300,000, based upon what you've,
$476,068 is what we're looking at.
oh, so the cut of 156 has already gone out of that?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yep.
Yep.
So what I did is I went through and I moved some numbers around. I've restored some things that were cut. I've moved some things forward into a subsequent fiscal year and moved 166,000 into fiscal 22. What we need to think about in moving stuff to fiscal 22 is it has to be something that we can reasonably accomplish in 3 months. We get money encumbered, so get a project plan or a purchase plan to get it money encumbered and be ready to go. So it obviously can't be personnel expenditures, can't be anything like that, but it can be some of these smaller projects. So based on what I've done, I'll go through what I recommended, and you can tell me I'm off base, and obviously that won't be the first time I've heard that. So I get back to about $6,000 to the good, and I think the chief has already spent that on the rental items that we need. So we'll be about balanced. So to run you through, so you got the worksheets in front of you. I'm not going to go through this. Let's see. I've moved the office partition and desk, which is a $4,800 item. I'm just going to go down the list. I've moved that to fiscal 22. So that's something that we can reasonably get money encumbered for in the current year. The VHB, the Town Park Shoreline Design and Permitting, moved that to a subsequent year. That's $120,000. So that is the living shoreline design for the town park. We've applied for grant funding. The grant funding is not included on the revenue side of the budget because we don't know if we're going to get it. So what I would propose to do is move that out to fiscal '24 unless we get grant funding. If we get the grant funding, we'll come to you for a budget amendment to increase revenue and increase expenditures.
Is that the 120?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Moved into the restore cut. So we had reduced the amount for SCBA replacement that originally was $36,000. So I'm suggesting that we restore that $6,000. We want to stay on the schedule if we can. That's for the fire department.
What's SCBA?
Self-contained breathing apparatus. So it's the air pack they wear. We're changing the bottles from the larger, bulkier ones to smaller ones and lighter.
Okay.
That sound right to you, Chief? Yep. All right.
You move that back to the budget?
I just 6,000. So we had eliminated 6,000 of that, and then we put 6,000 back in. The office cubicle for in fire and police, so you'll see that in two different places, $2,500. Move that into fiscal '22, because that's something that we can reasonably accomplish. I believe we can at least get encumbered and begin the work on the records. I did it again. Digitization. That $35,000 in IT, we can move that into fiscal '22, get that kicked off. Again, office cubicle for those office cubicle requests for the sergeants and the other half of the administrative person.
Which one was
Oh,
that?
both the 49 and the 2,500?
49 and 25, that's correct. Yeah, to move that into fiscal '22. Moving the license plate reader system, move that into fiscal '22. That's something we believe we can get encumbered. Putting back in the fire safe storage, that was something that we had eliminated. So that's the ammunition and record storage in police. The town hall HVAC systems, move that into fiscal '22. Move the public safety building repairs, move that to subsequent year, 80,000 of that to subsequent year, 5,000 to fiscal '22. Here's my thinking, and I've actually talked to Chief Black about this. I have concern about spending $85,000 on a building that we don't know if it will continue to exist, because the Corps has not come back to us and said, yes, we want it. If they say, yeah, we want it, then I'd be more inclined to recommend to you that we spend more money on it. But until they make that decision, this year, we can do some more roof patching and we can do some siding. There's some places where I'm told that you can actually kind of put your fingers into the siding. So we need to replace some siding and get some paint work done. So I'd recommend let's get that done now. When/if the Corps ever tells us what they're going to do, we'll drive then what we can do in the future. But certainly don't want to put a brand new roof on this building and then say, we don't want the building, and watch a brand new roof go off in a dumpster. I just don't think it's a wise use of resources. We need to do something with the roof because we want to keep the stuff and the people dry. But we believe we can accomplish that.
Could I delve into that just a little bit more? Because I appreciate the rationale here. I was under the impression that the work had to be done just for kind of people. There's a lot more than just fire trucks in that building.
Right.
And so we want to make sure everybody's safe and protected. And you're saying that $5,000 could get us through the next fiscal year just with patching and such.
5,000 plus what, there'll probably be a little more that might be needed at some point, but I think we can get a lot of the lift done. The chief's going to talk.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up on that.
Yeah, so Drew and I talked, and I'm with him. We watch it daily. I have Trey watching it daily, literally, because that roof is old. The building's 40 years old at this point. I think we can patch this year and hopefully in this fiscal year know the future. And we'll just continue to patch and watch. But if I come back and say we need $5,000 more to really get this patch done, that's a different discussion than $85,000.
Right. And I don't disagree that, that it's a lot of money to throw on a building that we may not have possession of. So but on that note, is there any talk with the Corps regarding the condition of the building if we were to give it to them, or do they not care?
They've actually looked at the building several times. So they're aware of what the building is and what.
They're not basing anything on the condition?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
The last time we met with them, actually told them, I said, listen, we need a decision from y'all because we're considering putting a roof on this thing. So please tell us before we have to do our budget. And well, here we are.
And they didn't give you they didn't give you anything?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that didn't prompt
it's working
them.
up the very, very long chain of command.
Right.
Drew, is it safe to say that if they take the building, the only thing, they're going to get the building for free, basically? We don't have to do the demo on it. Is that correct?
Right. So that's the advantage to us, is that part of our project won't be to demo and restore the site. The advantage to them is if they want it, they get space that they want, and then we'll have to do some negotiating about the future lease of the new site and what consideration in the lease is given for the fact that they have received an asset.
But we're also not going to have to demo that building.
Correct. Well,
If they take
if they take it, right. If they don't, we'll still demo it as part of our project. And that's what's driving this thinking. Until they make that decision, yeah, we want to be wise with the expenditure of the town's resources. So the way I've done this is I've moved the emergency exit stairs in Town Hall and the maintenance shop, maintenance building construction. So that's 8,000 and 25,000 into fiscal '22, both of which those projects we can get kicked off in the next couple of months. I think I changed my mind on that. Yeah, that doesn't belong there, sorry. The retaining wall replacement, well, we'll just put that into a subsequent year. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped right over duck trail. So the other really big item to move into fiscal '24 is 120,000. That's repaving duck trail. So this is the final portion of duck trail to be repaved in the Sanderling area. It is not in the state of disrepair that the stretch was that we repaired this year. It can reasonably go another into fiscal '24. The reason that we're fighting some of these items, and you might get concerned, why are we having to battle these things? Are we going to have money for capital? 240,000-ish right now is the funding gap that we're dealing with in the brick project. So if we had that money to work with, and we will in fiscal '24, we'll be able to get back on schedule. But we're not overly concerned with the condition of that stretch of duck trail right now.
Where is that run from, Drew?
If someone has the CIP in front of them, anyone have a CIP? No?
Yeah. I don't think it's that bad. I don't have a recollection.
Hate doing that.
It's okay.
Between Blue Heron and Waxwing.
Okay.
So And I know during the CIP presentation, we showed a picture of it, and there's a couple places where it's got some alligatoring.
Yeah.
But it's not
Yeah, it's not real.
peeled like that other section that was really in rough shape.
And the flooding there in that area, I know Sandy's not here to speak to that, but that was one of the things that really we wanted to push to alleviate for safety reasons.
Right. And the project we did this current fiscal year helped with that
Right.
significantly. Right.
I have a little trouble with that one, but I guess we're going to take these one by one, but because, I mean, I know we're going to be seeing a lot of sidewalk improvement if we get our brick grant, and we'll see everyone will be like, look at the new sidewalk, and great, and so there's some sidewalk, you could argue that there's your sidewalk money going in there, because I really don't like the idea of pulling, just an overall figure that we have in the budget every year for sidewalk maintenance. It's just something we've done, and it's one of the core elements of the town that predates the town itself that I think we don't want to lose sight of it. That's all I'm going to say. So I would be in favor of at least putting something toward that. I don't know, but I just wanted to throw that out there. You're suggesting we move it completely out of the year.
That's it.
The bicycle pedestrian counters, why do we really need those?
To continue to give the kind of data that you get from these other ones.
I mean, is that something that, even though we're going to get a lot of data, we really need it right away?
Is it an absolute need? Nope.
Or we could
Move it to this year, right?
move it
Yeah.
to this year?
You moved it to this year, right?
Correct.
Oh, you did move it
Because
to this
it was
year.
in the fiscal +23 budget. In order to balance it, moved it, because that's something that we could do in fiscal '22. If we want to put it off and try to do it another, I'm sorry?
Putting it on subsequent years. How much, I lost track here as we're going through this thing, but how much did we move to '22?
131.
Well, that's right, because the 120 doesn't get there at all. 131 would.
And then what do we move, how much do we move to subsequent years?
355. Sorry, let me make that a little bit bigger so you can see that.
Could I ask a couple questions?
Of course. Yes, sir.
The crosswalk lighting, would that go along with the elimination of the paving up there? And the
No.
duck trail surveying and engineering? Last item.
So what we would do is get all the surveying and engineering done in fiscal '23 for a fiscal '24 project, as opposed to doing it all in 1 year. But the crosswalk lighting is a separate project. So that is current, so our current unlit crosswalks will get the same type of street crosswalk lights, I don't want to call them street lights, that we have.
Can we move that into this year?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. That's it, I moved that into this year.
Okay.
So that's in that 131. That's something we can make those purchases now.
And to Monica, was it 2 years ago, we gave them an extra $100,000 for paving up there, over their 100 they were allotted, if you remember correctly.
And I would have been in favor of doing it again the next year, if you recall, just so we could have gotten more bang for our buck, which we got some really great value out of those 2 years before things got real pricey for this last year. But yeah, definitely sidewalks are something we need to stay on, particularly as we move from the asphalt to the concrete
Yeah.
throughout the town. It's, I mean, one of the reasons that our tax rate is lower than everybody else's is we don't have street maintenance, but we do have a sidewalk, and I don't want to lose sight of that, because it's a huge asset for us, and safety.
So how much are we short here, Drew?
You're not. You're right on. You're at about 5,900 to the good right now. But of course, the chief has spent that on the barricades and stuff, the rental stuff. Do you have a number on that, chief? The total?
Oh, the parade expenditures.
Oh, that's right, it's 7,000.
We're fine.
Close enough.
We'll find the other 1,000.
And going up a little bit, I think I wrote the 131 that we're going to spend this year, if we did it according to your proposal, would reduce our fund balance contribution. We'd be down to about 650.
Yep, 630, so 635, and it'll make your fund balance percentage 71.2.
For this year.
What would it be?
It would be, the total fund balance would be 7.3, so it would be 71.2%. I'm sorry it's so small, but it is up on the screen. but it is.
84%, which is where we are right now, I think is what you said.
We're good, I think. Without losing anything else that's on the screen? Go ahead.
What was that fund balance percentage? I think we were at 84% previous.
84.8.
4. Why can't I find that again?
Yeah, so we were projecting 72.5, now it's 71.2. So not a whole lot, because we're only adding 100 and, well, it's gone. 100 and,
I'm mixing it up then. What's the 84% on the fund balance figure?
so that was, 84% is the end of fiscal '21.
Okay.
Projected to end fiscal '22 with the budget unbalanced, it was 72.5.
Oh,
Balancing-
so this is comparing to the 72 figure, the
Right, so-
71 figure.
Right, correct.
But I thought if we spent more money in this year, that would also lower that 84%. Because we're using some of the money that would normally go into the fund balance of 76,669. We're only adding 635, so that 84% was, I thought, based, am I wrong about that? Am I mixing the years up?
A little bit. So the 84% was at the end of fiscal '21.
Okay, so that's not going to change.
Right. So that stays where it is. What we're projecting in fiscal '22, which is what we're talking about now, if we hadn't messed with anything, we just took the proposed budget the way it was, or the draft budget for fiscal '23, it would have been 72.5%. We needed to reduce some expenditures to balance the budget. We're moving some, so.
I'm keep
Yeah.
going, because my question remains.
So, okay, so we're going to, let's forget about the budget. Forget about the budget.
Okay.
We're going to take 131,000 out of that budget, and we're going to put it into this year. So we're going to increase.
spend it.
We're going to increase expenditure, right? We're going to reduce the amount of money that we put into fund balance. So we're increasing the denominator and increasing or decreasing the numerator. So that means that this percentage drops. So it goes from what was 72.5 to 71.2 projected at
Okay,
the
so
end of fiscal '22.
So the 72, and that's just if I had that
Yep.
page, the 72 was, the 84, no, forget the 84. The 72 that you were talking about was for this current year.
Correct, fiscal '22.
And that's where I was mixed up.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Where is that page?
26.
Thank you. I'm way off.
So basically, we can come to the public hearing with a balanced budget by cutting, or spending 131 this year and 355 in future years.
Correct.
Okay.
And of course, we're still dealing with estimates on sales tax and
Exactly.
occupancy, so
Right.
there could be an upward opportunity
Right.
to put more on the fund balance going forward to into next year, which would give us an opportunity for a budget amendment for some paving or whatever. So,
Wasn't that all designed last year, that, the rest of that walkway, when we extended it?
I'll have to double check that, Mr. Whitman.
I think it was, we just decided we were just going to do a one period, not the whole thing,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
Right.
So
I'll
there's
have
no engineering there. Shouldn't be any engineering.
Would that complete the whole thing? Is that?
North.
So,
Nor,
so that,
Okay.
okay.
which it would.
This is me on 4-hour sleep. That design is south. So that is to add, to start working to add, looking at adding sidewalk west side, south.
For the 10. It's for a future project.
Just ask.
And on the brick project, did you take into account the grant we don't have that we think we might have to reduce our cost or not? The additional, whatever.
So, yeah, the grant that we just applied for,
Yeah.
For that and for this, no.
Okay, so we're at the
Right.
original cost.
Yes, sir.
Did Chris up the cost of the overall project?
Yes.
Okay, and that you took that into consideration?
Yep, so that's built into this budget, yes.
Yeah, the only thing I have trouble with is the sidewalk part, and I can't remember if we ever had a $60,000 piece, you know, in other words, I'd like to look, I'd like a little more information on what we tabled and what we think is, you know, because we've been budgeting a pretty flat amount every year for sidewalk maintenance and seeing what it would get us and when the bids came and all that, and we have the design already in place, so I just hate to,
Well, Sandy upstairs, Sandy would know that information.
well, maybe we could just, you could send an email or something with that, with some more details on the sidewalk.
So what's the question that you want details on? So I want to be sure I get you the right information.
I guess what I want
What we've
to
spent.
remind myself of is how much we didn't, what we didn't fund last year. In other words, we had 100, about a same figure in our budget last year, about 120. I feel like we've been budgeting that much every year for the last few years.
That was 2 years ago.
And so
So that'd be fiscal '21. So
yeah.
the year
And
that's
so
already
the
closed, not the current
I
year.
have for going forward is, do we think 120 would finish up Sanderling? Kind of, sort of. I mean, it's a guess, but we know we had more, we didn't get as much with our money last year. We got more money before. More bang for our buck before this last year. And so I guess I want to remind myself what we actually spent in this year, what we spent this year and how
Okay,
much we
fiscal
got.
22, okay. And for fiscal '21?
Doesn't matter on 21, because, you know, that was a good year. So I just want to look at a more realistic year and also know, you know, how much linear feet we have to finish, just a little bit of an educated guess on what 120 gets us.
Well, based on, so the educated guess for the CIP is that 120 gets that Blue Heron to Waxwing. It finishes that.
Okay.
So that's the full stretch.
And that's the only thing that it's
Correct.
addressing.
Correct.
And if we happen to get, let's say 120 extra in our occupancy tax this year, how would everyone feel about putting it back in there? I don't know. I just hate to take it out. Is that just can't really do that? I mean, that's a huge budget amendment. I'm struggling with that.
I don't know if I'd put it all back in.
So the other option would be, I mean, we're still looking at putting 635 into fund balance. Budget for an appropriation of 120,000. So budget for a transfer from fund balance in fiscal '23 for 120,000 and leave that sidewalk project in place. So, you know, when we talk about increasing revenue or increasing expenditures, that's one way you can increase revenue. Again, I would never, advise that you do that for a recurring expenditure, but for a capital item like this, in a year when we have a one-off capital item that's already hitting us by 240,000 in the brick, the cost delta in the brick project, whether or not we actually have to use that 120 of appropriated fund balance or not will depend a lot on what fiscal 23 brings, and also will depend a lot on the grants that we've applied for and we haven't heard from. So
I think that maybe if, I tend to agree with Monica that I think we should try not to eliminate this section if we can help, because it is consistent with our mission and vision and, you know, everything we want to try and do for Duck. I think maybe if we went back, I like everything you did already here. I think you folks did a good job on preparing this and suggesting options to fix the shortfall. I've been through a lot of non-municipal budget sessions in my life. And this one was relatively easy, surprisingly. Usually a lot more fighting, so that was good. But I think if we went back and looked at travel, training, and dues and subscriptions, I bet we could knock off enough so that we could probably move less than 100,000 from our budget, from our reserve into the, you know, this year. And so it won't be a big amount, and we could still, you know, like, let's say we could knock off 25,000, you know, across the whole thing on travel, training, dues, and subscriptions. If possible, then we could just say we're just transferring 95,000 over, and we're going to be able to leave this project in and get it done.
Well, I can see the travel training. I think dues and subscriptions are generally software, you know, subscriptions, which I can't.
But they went up.
Oh, okay.
I'm just looking at the overages.
Overages.
Just not cutting it from what it was spent, just at the overages.
Got it.
Same thing with travel.
And I don't
But
disagree.
maybe not, but it might be.
Yeah, yep,
so-
that's a good thought.
We don't know if the 120 is just a number we put in the budget or if that's the number to complete sampling, correct?
Well, he's saying he
All-
thought the
all-
CIP was,
right, so all I know is, so the input from staff that's involved with that particular project was 120 was the number to put in the CIP and the budget for that piece. So that wasn't just, well, it's 120 and let's put that in there. It was actually based on what we've seen for expenditures. Is it actual? Probably not.
the other thing we might get some economies of scale on is while they're doing the sidewalk project for Phase 4, we might get some economies of scale mobilizing them up to Sanderling. We've seen that before.
Yeah.
Just how willing they are. I mean, there's going to be just a lot of construction equipment in Duck if we get our way. And it would be nice to parlay off of that, too. Hard to know.
So you're saying the other alternative is to appropriate 120 of the fund balance?
Right.
Won't be actually just appropriated money in the fund balance, but won't affect the fund balance at all from the standpoint of totally ours, right?
It will only affect it if we spend it, yeah, yeah. So it will only affect it is if fiscal 23's budget, we come spot on in revenue and expenditures, and we're not planning to add anything, and we do need to spend that, it will reduce the balance by 120,000. So I'm
And it will show up
hopeful
as
that-
allocated as opposed to unallocated? Or does it?
Well, it'll show that it's fund balance appropriated in the budget.
Appropriated.
But we won't, again, something you don't spend if you don't need.
And we might find that we get more revenue than we thought on some of those
Yes.
estimates, in which case we don't have to allocate it.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Once we can unallocate it if we want.
Yeah. Well, it'll just sit there and it'll show as,
Right.
you know, revenue that's not been collected,
Right.
because we haven't used it yet. But your total revenue budget
Right.
is likely to exceed estimate.
And then if things were going in a direction we didn't feel comfortable with, we could always say, we're not going to do that project this year, we'll move it. But at least we'll have an intent to try and do it if we can.
And if this year turns out better,
Yeah.
put it in the summer.
That would be a really great solution. I appreciate everybody getting behind that.
Yeah, I think that works.
Hate to lose that momentum.
See if they can find two.
Sir?
See if they can find two, remember? I mean, we would want to say it's 120, and maybe now it's 200, or, you know, or it's 50. I'm sure.
Hard to
they'll be
know,
able
I guess,
based
with-
upon the lineage.
And the concrete price and
Yeah, right.
everything else.
I mean, the
Yeah,
capital-
I mean, it's, yeah, that number would probably, it's a couple months old right now, so.
Yeah, but we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, things could continue to go up, or maybe work will slow down, and even though material prices are up, they might be looking for work. Who knows? I don't know. It's crazy right now.
Maybe said he take another look at it. Or Jim, who's ever working it.
Probably, well, Joe. Chris DeWitt.
I agree, though, your other suggestions are really very palatable. You know, I hate to see the shoreline project delayed, but on the other hand,
Can't do everything.
just temporarily.
And again, that's one of those that if we get that grant, we'll come to you and say.
Right, that's
Let's-
right. I
let's
gotta
go.
make a note of that, unless we get, I have that here. Yeah, I forgot. A little asterisk. Okay.
So I think we have a balanced budget to bring forward to the public hearing, correct?
Yes.
Do we need to have a motion to bring this to public hearing? Or we just put it on the agenda?
So it'll be advertised, so it'll go in the paper
You can send it to the paper so it runs Sunday,
Sunday.
starting Sunday.
What do we need?
I'm sorry,
It's already scheduled, right?
it would start running Sunday.
So, yeah, his question is it already scheduled? Robert, do they need a motion?
I think typically in the past, there's been a motion to schedule a public hearing.
All right. I'll entertain a motion for that then.
I'll make a motion that we schedule a public hearing for our May 4th meeting to discuss the budget as proposed.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
So I will, I'm going to go through and make the changes, and I'll shoot some information back out to council, just so you can sanity check me. I want to be sure that I've done what you said. And then this needs to go in the, when do I need to have this ready, Lori?
Tomorrow?
No
You've
pressure.
You're working on 4 hours of sleep,
No
is that what I heard you say? Oh,
That's
gosh.
fine.
There's probably going to be a lot of checking that needs to happen, everybody.
That's why they invented caffeine. No, it's mostly done.
Why do you need it tomorrow?
It has to be to the papers by noon tomorrow in order to run on Sunday.
The actual budget.
Yes.
Oh,
The ordinance, just the ordinance,
I mean,
just the
ordinance,
totals.
Proposed
If you
ordinance.
Department
want
total,
to
that's
run
easy.
beginning next Wednesday, then we have until Monday.
Does Wednesday give us the appropriate time?
If you'll
So,
run it
give
Wednesday and
give the guy the,
then Sunday.
yeah, let's give him the weekend.
Work this weekend out.
yeah, if it makes the
Well, y'all are
deadline,
just
that's
so
good,
nice.
right?
All right, well, it'll,
Fine,
then
it's-
we'll,
Unless you want to, I mean, if you're done, do it, but if you're not, take your time and.
Yeah,
well, so it's not so much my time, it's yours, because I will send this out to you and just, please call me, text me, run me down in the street to let me know I got it wrong. Before we-
If we don't have to do it till Wednesday, that's
Yeah,
fine. That's
let's
still a
wait.
week before the meeting, so,
Sure.
yeah. Thank you. Well, with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. I'll remind the council that our next meeting will be the regular meeting on Wednesday, May
This
4th,
is mine.
and entertaining a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Any discussion on the motion? There being none, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.
Well, we beat some.